Hello, listener. The fact you hear this means you're alive. If you're new here, consider subscribing and comment below where you're listening from. Let's begin the story. I'm Tomas Navarro, night lead at Westside Hardware, and I'll walk you through what we did when the street went wrong. A horn on Parson Street jams, emitting a thin, continuous note. A bus sits sideways across both lanes with a hatchback stopped against it. We decide to close early. I lower the roll gate and check each latch by hand. Asha pulls brown paper over the front windows and smooths the tape. Milo turns off the aisle lights, leaving only the exit signs illuminated. Mrs. Cho cracks the back door open 2 inches and reports that the alley air is clean. Tariq monitors the cameras and calls out the time. We start with simple tasks because they're quick to complete. Our store is expansive. Lumber lines the north wall, garden supplies the south, paint is up front with rentals and receiving in the back. A small mezzanine overlooks the dock. Propane cages sit outside the garden gate. A forklift stands ready near the pallets. The breaker panel is located under the stairs. None of this is designed as a bunker, so we make do with what we have. I write concise rules on the board. Keep noise low, keep lighting dim, keep lanes clear. If it hums, turn it off. If it shines, cover it. If you open a door, close it gently and lock it twice. Short rules are easier to follow when your mind is racing. I tie the marker to the rail to prevent it from disappearing. We inventory what's crucial. Water first, then food, batteries, tape, gloves, and masks. We announce each count once, write it once, and circle it. Our phones struggle to find a signal, mostly failing. Power remains steady. The radio breaks through briefly to advise maintaining distance and avoiding contact before reverting to static. Outside noise diminishes rapidly. The horn dies, and the street falls silent. 3 people pass in front of the store without glancing our way. A crosswalk chirp starts at the corner and all 3 turn simultaneously. They drift toward the sound in a slow line. We keep our distance from the glass. Asha stops the paint shaker. Milo checks the panel and nods. Mrs. Cho sets a doorstop to prevent the back door from slamming. Tariq marks 642 on the board and keeps the alley cam feed up. I drape a tarp over the last window to prevent the shop floor from being visible from outside. We're 5 inside now, speaking in low voices and gesturing before we talk. No lights face outward, and we only run machines if they're essential. We maintain our positions and listen. Nobody moves. The first knock hits the roll gate, 3 short taps with a pause between them, and every head turns to the front in unison. We keep the board simple and visible. Rules sit on top, counts under them, and time on the edge. I stand at the service desk and read each step. Asha writes while I walk. Water first. We pull 4 cases of half-liter bottles and 2 one-gallon jugs from receiving. I call it as 192 half-liters and 2 gallons, and Asha writes it and circles it. We estimate 1 bottle per person every 4 hours as base usage, more if someone is injured or working hard. I mark checks at the top of each hour. Food next. Staff snacks, vendor leftovers, and seasonal stock. We inventory 2 boxes of bars, 1 case of trail mix, 3 sleeves of crackers, 4 cups of peanut butter, and 12 canned soups from a charity bin. Not pretty, but calories. Milo stacks it on the grout table and covers it with cardboard, batteries, and light. We inventory 8 packs of AA, 4 of AAA, 2 lantern batteries, 3 headlamps from returns. Tariq checks flashlights and lines them by output. Small ones tie to tasks, large ones stay parked. He tapes over shiny indicators, power and fuel. 2 small generators in rentals. We keep them dry and cold unless a life needs them. Milo checks oil and wipes frames. He finds 4 5-gallon cans of treated gas and sets them against the back wall. I write do not run unless needed on both handles. Light discipline. Work lights point at the ceiling. We tape bright LEDs. Asha hangs thin plastic under the skylight. Exit signs stay. A dim strip marks the path to the back. No beams on glass, no spots on faces. Noise control. Paint shaker stays off. Nail gun compressor stays off. The vending machine near the door roars, so Tariq unplugs it and tags the cord. If a tool squeaks, we pat it. If a hinge clicks, we stick a felt square at the contact point. We keep the floor dry so shoes don't squeal. Paths. 2 rolling ladders make a clean line from front to mezzanine stairs to receiving to the back door. Pallets set edges, not traps. We leave room to run. I chalk arrows at knee height so a crawl still shows the way. Milo drags a skid near garden to make a soft choke point that slows feet without catching ankles. Security layers. Roll gate down, front door locked, garden gate barred. We check the back door and make sure the key turns smooth. I hang a small bell inside the frame with tape as a quiet alert. If the door moves, it makes a small sound only we hear. Tariq ties a thread across receiving at shin height that drops a washer onto a metal pie tin if broken. It is simple and it works. Sanitation. Mrs. Cho lays out gloves, wipes, and 2 spray bottles, one with alcohol and one with soapy water. She says fresh air beats strong fumes to avoid attracting attention with strong odors and wedges the back door 1 inch. Trash bags sit by the sinks. A covered bin stays near the desk for used wipes and gloves. Medical. The kit lives under returns. We add 2 clean towels, saline tape, and a foil blanket. Quick screen before anyone moves past receiving. Check for bites, deep cuts, fever, and how steady they walk. 1 chair and 1 light stay there. Questions come in the same order each time for quick assessment. Communications, first names, 1 sentence at a time. If radios wake up, keep them on low and off scanning mode. Until then, speak face to face, don't shout and point. 1 tap means stop, 2 means move, 3 means back up. Tariq draws the taps on the board. Fire risk. Propane cages stay outside, we don't touch them. Heaters off, no open flame. If a fire starts outside, we close what we can. Milo pulls an extinguisher, checks the gauge, and sets it near the desk. Maps. I sketch the block. Main Street runs west to east. The school field is north. The mini-mart with the blue awning is east. The tire shop is south behind chain link. I mark 3 routes as escape routes if we have to leave. Alley to Maple, school lot to the north fence, and the service lane behind the tax office. We are not moving now. Sleep. We write a rotation in pencil. 2 on watch, 2 working, 1 resting. 15 minutes off for the watchers each hour. The person off doesn't leave the floor unless someone covers their lane. We plan to adjust if the night changes, walk through. I take front to back. Asha takes paint to garden. Milo checks receiving and the dock. Mrs. Cho watches air at the back door. Tariq checks cameras and timestamps. We meet at the board and list what broke, what changed, what hurts. We fix small things and write the rest. Outside, the street holds still. The crosswalk chirp keeps its rhythm. Inside, our list is short and the lines are clear. The clock reads 6:58. We have a plan we can follow if the next hour is worse than this one. Windows and signs. Brown paper covers the front, seams taped tight. No open sign, no hours, no glow as welcome. A note by the service door sets a knock. 3 pause, then 2. Hands visible, step back. Miss the steps and we do not open. Air and masks. Mrs. Cho checks alley and says air is clean. Cloth masks, a few respirators if chemicals show. The wedge on the back door keeps a gap. If wind shifts, we close to prevent potentially contaminated air from entering. Cameras and kits. Tariq runs alley and roof on a dim tablet. We stage 3 grab kits with tape, cord, gloves, gauze, a headlamp, a marker. I put down the marker and turn to the team. What we needed were clear lanes, solid backups, and simple direct communication. Asha was in charge of paint and lighting. She knew all the tricks for blocking stray light and dimming the place down without making it impossible to see. I handed her tape, paper, and a couple of clamp lamps. "You're in charge of light and cover," I said. "Keep reflections off the glass and make sure the aisles are dim but safe to move through." Milo took care of deliveries. He could maneuver the forklift and move pallets without making a sound. "You're in charge of movement and heavy lifting," I told him. "Set up the lanes, block any clear lines of sight, and keep that forklift ready to roll with the key in your pocket." Mrs. Cho, our neighbor, used to teach chemistry. I stacked wipes, gloves, and spray on the counter. "You're in charge of air quality and sanitation," I said. "Keep that back door open for fresh air when you can, but seal it up tight if things get bad. And make sure that Wedge keeps it from slamming shut." Tariq handled key cutting and monitored the security cameras. "You're our eyes and our clock," I told him. "Keep track of the time, call out any changes you see, and sketch out what's happening so we can communicate without words." I was in charge of the whiteboard, the doors, and making the final call. If we needed to vote, I'd break any ties, and if a door had to be opened, that was my job. We assigned backups. Asha covered for me on the board, and I covered her on lights. Milo backed up Tariq on the cameras, and Tariq backed up Milo on lane management. Mrs. Cho filled in wherever she was needed. We all stated our backups clearly and wrote them down next to our names. We established a code of knocks. 3 taps pause, then 2 taps meant it was staff. 2 long taps signaled to close the door. 1 steady tap meant stop talking. Even if someone outside accidentally hit our staff knock, we'd still check their hands, eyes, and how far away they were. We all carried small kits on our belts: tape, a light, gloves, a marker, and bandages. All communication in the receiving area was kept short and quiet. Asha tied a cloth strip at knee height along the main path. "If the lights go out, crawl and follow this," she said. Milo put down rubber mats at each turn to give us better grip and taped the edges down flat. Tariq posted route cards with a name and arrow on each one. Mrs. Cho set up a screening procedure for the service door. She wrote, "Hands open, pause," then "show forearms" on a folded card and posted it. If people followed the instructions, we'd check their skin and the way they moved. If they didn't, we wouldn't open the door. We discussed the propane. The cage was outside the garden gate. "We don't touch those tanks," I said. "If a fire starts out there, we seal the doors. No one plays the hero." We ran a 5-minute drill. "Front to back, then back to front," I called out, and we moved into action. Asha dimmed a light and checked for reflections on the glass. Milo shifted a pallet to block a clear view. Mrs. Cho checked the airflow and adjusted the wedge. Tariq kept track of the time. I checked each latch and called out, "Set," when it felt secure. We switched roles and ran the drill again. Asha noticed a chrome trash can that was reflecting light and covered it with paper. Milo heard a hinge creaking and dabbed some grease on it with a rag. Tariq took a flickering flashlight out of service. Mrs. Cho adjusted the wedge to keep the door open just an inch. I added a bell on a string to the back door so even a slight movement would make it ring twice. We established a system for communication. One person would call out the task, the second would repeat the keyword, and the third would carry out the action. "Lights," Asha said, and Milo echoed, "Lights," before flipping the breaker. "Door," I said, and Tariq responded, "Door," before securing the pin. 2 basic rules to help manage stress. Speak up if you're not feeling okay, and drink some water whenever we check the time. We assigned positions. Asha took the front left behind the ladder rack. Milo covered the main aisle near the forklift. Mrs. Cho stayed near the back door, watching the wedge and keeping disinfectant spray handy. Tariq sat at the desk with the tablet. I patrolled the area, walking from front to back and back again, looking for any changes. A noise ran along the alley fence and stopped at the gate. Tariq looked up and raised a hand to signal. I grabbed the tablet, and the camera showed corrugated metal and a motionless shadow near the dumpster. We waited 10 seconds. Nothing happened. Everyone took a breath and double-checked that they had their kits. At 7:12, we locked down our positions. The store was set, the rules were clear on the board, and everyone knew their area and who had their back. I did one final sweep and was halfway past the paint desk when the roll gate knocked again. The knock came again. 3 short taps, a pause, then 2. That was our signal. I crouched down by the customer door, peering through the narrow gap above the roll gate. Asha took position to my left, Milo to my right, and Tariq angled the tablet so I could see the sidewalk view from the camera. A man was pressed up against the glass, hands raised. He had on a light jacket and a badge. I could see his mouth moving, but the roll gate swallowed his words. Behind him, a woman with a tote bag kept glancing nervously toward the corner where the crosswalk signal was chirping. "Hands open," I said, tapping the sign through the crack. He spread his fingers wide and turned his arms to show us his forearms. No blood in sight. The woman did the same. Her knuckles were scraped, but the wounds looked dry. We held our ground. The street carried sound well, and raising that gate would make a racket. "Step back 1 pace," I said, holding up a finger. He watched my finger and took a step back. The woman followed suit. Tariq held up the tablet. The alley was clear, the roof was clear. The front camera showed the man and woman and an empty sidewalk stretching east. No one else was visible. Mrs. Cho was waiting in the back with a mask and gloves. A chair was set up in the receiving area. If we opened the door, she'd give them a quick check. We had a place for them to sit down. "Where are you coming from?" I asked, speaking through the crack in the gate. He said they were coming from the mini-mart on Maple, pointing east. "How long ago?" I asked. He held up 2 fingers. The woman nodded in agreement. I kept the questions simple. "Any bites?" I asked. He shook his head and glanced at the woman. She said no and turned her forearms for us to see again. Her hands were shaking. She set the tote bag down, then picked it up and hugged it tight. Asha focused on their eyes. Milo watched their feet. Tariq kept an eye on the corners. I counted to 10, watching for any change in their behavior. No swaying, no leaning, no sudden movements. We huddled behind the rack. "If we open the door, it's the side door only," Asha said. "Side door only," I confirmed. "Keep the instructions short and simple," Mrs. Cho added. "Hands open, show us your arms, then take a seat." "I'm ready to pull the bolt when you give the word," Milo said. I laid out the plan. The front door stayed locked. I moved to the receiving area. Milo covered the main aisle. Tariq switched the cameras to the side door and the alley. Mrs. Cho stood ready with the chair. We told the couple to walk around to the alley and meet us at the service door. If they refused, we wouldn't open the door. I went back to the crack in the gate. "Head to the alley," I said, pointing along the wall. "The service door is back there. Remember, hands open, show us your arms, and stop at the tape." The man nodded quickly, and the woman gave a single nod. They turned left and started walking along the storefront. Tariq followed them on the front camera. I jogged to the receiving area and went to the service door. The wedge kept it from slamming shut. I lifted the inner bar and positioned the screen. The chalk line on the hinge was still intact. Their footsteps echoed in the alley. The man stopped at the tape. He held his hands open and showed us his forearms again. The woman stood beside him, mirroring his actions. I opened the door a crack. "One at a time," I said. "You first, slowly." He stepped inside and stared at my hands. I kept my palms visible. "Chair," I said, gesturing toward the receiving area. Mrs. Cho examined his arms and asked if he felt feverish. He said he felt a little warm, then shook his head. She gave him a couple of sips of water. The woman was next. She shifted the tote bag on her shoulder and stepped forward. Milo waited for my signal to close the door. Tariq monitored both cameras. Mrs. Cho cleaned the scrape on the woman's knuckles and bandaged it. "Name?" I asked. "Ben," the man replied. "Nora," the woman said. I wrote their names and the current time on the board. We had 2 new people inside, and we'd gotten through the first door without a sound. Then the tapping came again at the front. Same pattern, same pause. I didn't like that it was perfect 2 times in a row. We kept the front roll gate down. I left Ben and Nora with Mrs. Cho in receiving and headed for the mezzanine stairs. Asha followed with a clamp lamp and tape. Milo held his position on the floor and Tariq watched the alley on the security feed. The skylight above aisle 3 was old plastic. Streetlights made it glow and reflect. We couldn't risk that. I told Asha to hang thin shipping plastic. She taped the corners, letting it sag so the light diffused. The aisle went dark. Good. A siren wailed to the east, then stopped. The radio sputtered. Evacuation corridors. Flashing beacons, then cut out. I saw a white flash in the distance. "If that gets close, it'll pull them," Asha said, pressing each seam. "We tested for leaks." I stood in aisle 3 and raised my hand. Tariq watched the front camera to see if a shape showed on the papered glass. He said no. I shifted left and right. Still nothing. Asha turned the lamp to the ceiling. "No hard lines. That's what we wanted." "Roof check," I said, grabbing the ladder from the stockroom. Tariq kept the roof feet up. I opened the hatch, listened, and climbed out, keeping low. The school field was dark. The mini-mart glowed weakly on Maple, and the tire shop yard was empty. The roof was clear. I taped the hatch so any shift would show and wrote the time. I closed it to 1 inch and listened. No scraping, no steps. I latched it and went back down. Ben asked if Nora could sit by the fan. "Sure," I said, pointing to the chair. Nora drank slowly, watching us. We set a roof check routine. Check the hatch every 30 minutes, write the time, and listen. No one near the edge. A distant light blinked twice to the east. 3 figures a few blocks over turned and started that way, then stopped. I tracked the timing with Tariq. If that pattern moved closer, we'd wait it out. Milo used the forklift to move 2 pallets, breaking the line of sight from the front to aisle 3. He left space for a person, not a rush. He dragged rubber mats to the turns. Asha tied a cloth strip at knee height from front to back. Mrs. Cho set 2 chairs in receiving, wiped the doorknob and counter, and checked the wedge in the back door. I tested the skylight with a flashlight. Tariq watched from the front. "Nothing," he said. "Keep it that way," I replied. Asha nodded. The radio crackled once. "If you are inside a safe structure, remain in place and do not signal from windows or doors." Then it cut out. Nora asked if the flashing lights meant help was coming. "Not for us yet," I said. She took 2 sips. Mrs. Cho checked her forehead. "Warm, not hot." We kept her near the fan. Metal clattered in the alley. Tariq raised his hand. We froze and moved to our posts. The camera showed a cat on the dumpster. It jumped, knocking the lid. The lid rocked, then settled. I looked at the hatch tape. Still flat. We wrote the skylight steps on the board. Check hatch and time. Look for movement. Scan the block. Keep faces off the glass. Simple steps prevent mistakes. Tariq added the times. I walked the aisle under the skylight one last time. The light was flat, the paths clear, and the sound low. Aisha pointed at the clamp lamp. "This stays off unless we lose power," she said. I agreed. At 7:40, the white flashed to the east, held 5 seconds, then quit. 3 more figures drifted that way. Tariq noted the time and drew an arrow. We tracked it and stayed put. I checked the hatch tape and started down the ladder. Everyone was at their posts. Halfway down, the roll gate took a hit from outside. Not a knock, but a body. At the same moment, the skylight gave a dull thump. I took the impact at the front as a warning and stayed put. The gate shuddered, then stilled. Tariq kept the front camera feed up, but switched to the side view. A figure was moving toward the service door, slow and unsteady, someone half carrying someone else. "Back door," I said, heading for receiving. Asha followed with tape and a light. Milo held the main aisle, pallet jack ready. Mrs. Cho readied the chair and medical kit. Ben stayed with Nora. We went into protocol. The wedge kept the door from slamming. I set the inner bar to the first stop, keeping the opening narrow. Mrs. Cho put on gloves. Footsteps dragged in the alley. A man came around the corner, a woman leaning heavily on his arm. He saw the door and slowed. "Hands open," I said. He raised both hands, palms out. The woman kept her head down. "Stop at the tape," I said. He stepped back. "Show me your arms." He turned his forearms. No visible bites. The woman didn't move. "Is she conscious?" I asked. "Yes," he said. The woman lifted her head, her pupils normal. "What happened?" I asked. "She fell by the mini-mart, hit a cart. Her elbow bled, so I wrapped it." Mrs. Cho waited with the chair. "One at a time," I said. "You first." Slowly he nodded and stepped inside. I guided him to the chair and pointed to the other for the woman. Asha closed the door to the first stop. Tariq watched the alley and front cameras. Mrs. Cho cleaned the man's hands and checked his forearms. Scraped but dry. "Name?" I asked. "Derek," he said. "This is Lena." "Lena, lift your head," Mrs. Cho said. Lena blinked. "Drink," she said, tipping a bottle for 2 sips. "Let's see your arm," she said, cutting the bandage. The wound was a shallow tear on her elbow, ragged edges from metal, no bite marks. "Clean it up," Mrs. Cho said, pouring saline. Lena breathed steadily. I asked the final questions. "Fever? Chills? Anyone bite you?" Derek shook his head. Lena said no. Mrs. Cho dried the wound and wrapped a new bandage. We put their names and the time on the board. Derek and Lena, 7:48. Tariq noted, alley clear, front heavy, roof quiet. I gave them the rules. You can sit in receiving. Keep it quiet. No one touches the front. Bathroom trips with an escort. Derek nodded. Lena looked up. "Thank you," she said. A thud hit the front again. Not the pattern, a body. The roll gate flexed but held. Tariq raised a hand. "Two at the glass," he said. "No hands up." They're looking toward the corner. We secured the door. I checked the chalk line on the hinge. Still clean. Mrs. Cho handed Derek a mask. Lena asked for a towel. Tariq kept watch on the alley. 1 call and 1 answer for every move. Then something changed in the alley. The dumpster lid rattled and a shadow stopped at the corner. Too still for a cat, too low for a person. Tariq lifted the tablet. The camera showed an arm at ground level, then a hand pulling back. "On the ground," he said. I crouched, listening. A light scrape ran across the concrete, then stopped. Asha checked the wedge. Mrs. Cho stood behind me, chair angled to block a line of sight. Derek lifted his head. Lena watched the floor. "Call it," Asha said. "We hold. Do not open 10 seconds past, then 20. The scrape started again, moving toward the gate. Tariq tracked it, then the camera lost the arm. The roll gate took a light touch, then nothing. The radio crackled, giving half a sentence about corridors and beacons. Not close. Quiet inside. We reset. Lena moved to the cot by the fan. Mrs. Cho checked her bandage. Asha added their names under watch on the board. At 7:55, the alley went quiet. We had 4 visitors and the door stayed shut. I marked the time, took a breath. Then the scrape returned, closer this time, and the service door flexed under my hand. The service door gave 1 hard push, then stopped. I braced my shoulder against it, feeling the metal settle. "Not now," I muttered. Tariq kept the alley camera trained on the scene. I checked the front cameras. 2 figures were standing at the glass, facing the corner, not us. The crosswalk chirp sounded, and they leaned in that direction when it started, then stopped when it stopped. I wasn't opening the door. Mrs. Cho sat with Lena by the fan, keeping a close eye on her. Derek watched the service door, alert. Ben and Nora sipped their water quietly. Asha pointed towards the garden. "We need to check the propane cage," she said, her voice low. The cage was 10 feet from the garden gate, locked and chained. Heat and gas would draw attention. We couldn't risk it. "Hold your positions," I said. "Milo and I are checking the garden." Tariq noted the time. Asha taped over a bright spot under the skylight. Mrs. Cho adjusted her chair, keeping the service door in view. Milo and I moved out of receiving and into the main store. The propane cages faced the parking lot. Nothing moved out there. The mini-mart sign 2 blocks away blinked, then went dark. I placed my hand on the cage. The metal was cool, the lock clean, and there was no smell of gas. We closed the garden door quietly. "Cage is cold," I said. "No leaks." Aisha nodded. "Treat it like a magnet," she said. "If anyone lights a fire near it, this whole block will be swarming." We added a rule to the board. No heat sources near the garden. Shut the doors if we see any flames. The radio crackled. Thermal routes, beacons, then silence. If beacons swept our block, people would flock to anything bright and warm. I drew a large X over the garden area on the map. Something slammed against the roll gate. The two figures at the glass didn't react, still listening toward the corner. Milo positioned the pallet jack so it could quickly block the front entrance. We needed fresh air, not more smells. Mrs. Cho opened the back door a crack. "Air's clear," she said. I set up a fan to circulate air from receiving towards the garden. Tariq raised his hand, a warning. The alley camera showed two figures near the corner. One was crawling. The other stood, then bent over. The crawling figure reached the fence. The standing one faced the back door, motionless. I kept the door cracked. Lena sat up straighter. "I can help fold tape or something," she offered. "You can help by keeping track of the time," I said, handing her a marker. "When the minute changes, write it down." Asha pointed up at the exit signs. "Power blip," she said. The exit signs flickered, then came back on. The paint shaker whirred to life for a second, then died. I yanked its plug. We gathered at the board. "If a beacon sweeps this close, the garden will be overrun," Asha said. "We need to draw attention away from the propane," Milo said. "Space heater in the far lot," Tariq suggested. "Too risky," Mrs. Cho countered. "It's an ignition source." "No fires," I said. "Keep any heat source low and inside. If people are drawn to the lot, we wait it out." We adjusted the floor plan. Milo used the pallet jack to create a short barrier in front of the garden. Asha taped directional arrows at knee level. Tariq checked the tablet's battery. Mrs. Cho placed 2 damp towels near the back door. The radio sputtered. "Secure fuel supplies. Avoid all signals. Stay where you are." A faint smell drifted in from the garden. Not gas, but something like hot dust. I walked along the inside wall. The tape on the roof hatch was undisturbed. Roof was clear on the camera. I called for a fire watch. Someone would patrol the garden every 5 minutes, check the propane cage through the wire mesh, and sniff the air for anything unusual. Milo took the first shift. "All clear," he reported, closing the door quietly. Something slammed against the front roll gate again. The metal hummed, then settled. I placed my palm against the cool metal. At 8:11, a white flash lit the sky to the east for 3 seconds. Tariq called it out. 2 figures down the street started moving in that direction. Then a small flame erupted near the mini-mart's entrance. It flared up, died down, then flared again. People turned to look. "Close the garden door," Asha said urgently. I checked the cage, felt the lock, still cold. I closed and barred our garden door. Mrs. Cho narrowed the back door to a slit and checked the airflow. The flare grew larger, not a full-blown fire, but enough to draw attention. The noise level on the street increased. There was the sound of feet scuffing on the pavement and a soft pressure against the roll gate. We stayed at our posts. "Decoy," Milo said. "We could fire up that old space heater in the back corner. It hums and puts out a lot of light." "No way," Mrs. Cho said. "It'll overload the electrical panel." The flare died down, and wisps of smoke began to drift upwards. It wasn't thick, and it wasn't close. Tariq watched the alley. The crawling figure was gone. The standing figure leaned against the fence, then turned toward the corner when the crosswalk chirp sounded. I wrote on the board, "Hold the garden door. Keep all other doors secured, no heat sources outside. Check propane cage every 5 minutes." Another impact slammed against the roll gate, harder this time. The garden door rattled in its frame. We reinforced it with a wheel chock and a spare hinge pin. A cold draft snaked under the front roll gate, carrying the distinct odor of burning plastic. "Masks," Mrs. Cho said, quickly distributing them. She cracked the back door, opening it just an inch. The radio cut in with a warning. Under no circumstances are civilians to approach fuel storage areas. They are considered high-value targets. At 8:24, the white beacon to the east swept across the sky, moving slowly. Heads turned and followed its path down the block. The flare near the mini-mart finally went out completely, leaving the area in darkness. The roll gate took one more brutal hit, then fell silent. We waited, holding our breath. Tariq checked the alley and the roof, both clear. I edged towards the garden for one last look. My hand rested on the lock of the propane cage. Footsteps shuffled on the asphalt just behind the wire mesh of the fence, then something tapped deliberately on the cage, twice, as if it knew exactly where we kept our fuel. We needed to make the store workable even under pressure. I walked the aisles, noting potential hazards and helpful features. Milo positioned the pallet jack in the center aisle so he could maneuver it without scraping anything. Asha grabbed the tape. Tariq collected the route cards. Mrs. Cho made sure she had the disinfectant wipes and the back door wedge. I divided the store into 4 zones, each with a designated escape route and a backup plan. The zones were front to paint to mezzanine to receiving, garden to rentals to receiving, lumber to service to garden, and dock to stairs to the service door. I wrote them on the board with arrows indicating the paths. Even if the power went out, tape and paper would still work. We created soft choke points. 2 pallets placed sideways would slow down a crowd without trapping anyone. Rubber mats prevented slips and squeaks, and Asha taped down the edges to prevent tripping. Tariq put up small signs at each tight corner. Hands low, don't run. We covered anything reflective. A chrome trash can under the skylight was throwing a bright patch of light, so Asha wrapped it in paper. We covered the glass display case at the register with a cloth. I blacked out 2 glossy labels that were catching the light. We didn't want headlights finding us. We set up 3 grab-and-go kits where they'd be easy to reach, front left by the ladder rack, mid-floor near the paint section, and in receiving by the vault shelf. Each kit contained tape, cord, gauze, gloves, a headlamp, a small flashlight, and a marker. I added a card with a date and space to write down inventory. We set up some simple alarms. Tariq tied a thin thread across the side hall at shin level and looped it around a washer resting on a pie tin. If anyone brushed the thread, the washer would fall and make a sound. I added a small bell on a string at the garden door so any movement would make it chime quietly. We set up a bench light for working at night. It was angled down at the service desk away from the front windows. If the power went out, we'd replace it with a low-powered lantern. We made sure no one stood in front of the windows or pointed a flashlight at the glass. The exit signs stayed on so we could see the escape routes without using flashlights. We used tape to cover any stray LEDs. Fresh air remained a priority. Mrs. Cho kept the back door open a crack using the wedge and checked the airflow with a strip of paper. If the paper strip pulled outwards, we kept the door open that much. If smoke started to come in, we'd close it. We set up wipe-down stations at the door and at the service desk. We moved all the water and food supplies to one shelf in the receiving area. I wrote a note, 1 bottle per person every 4 hours, more for medical needs. Lena, who was still resting on the cot, got a little extra. Ben folded towels and carefully opened a case of water bottles, trying to be as quiet as possible. We finalized the rest schedule. 2 people would be on watch, 2 would be doing tasks, and 1 would be resting. The watch shifts rotated every 45 minutes with a 15-minute overlap. Resting was a required task. If anyone forgot, I'd point them towards the chair. Milo sat down for 10 minutes, then stood up when the timer on his watch buzzed. I designated the forklift as a movable barrier. Milo kept the key with him at all times. He used the forklift to lift a pallet of concrete mix and positioned it sideways in front of the garden to block a direct path. He kept the forks low to the ground so they wouldn't scrape. If we needed to close off an area, he could move the pallet quickly and quietly. We put up 2 signs on the wall. No loud tools without my permission. Hand tools only. Tariq locked the tote containing the power tools and taped the key to the whiteboard. I did a sweep of the store, crouching low to the ground to see what the dim lighting revealed. The taped arrows were visible. The cloth strip was easy to locate by touch. The rubber mats provided good traction. There were no puddles and no loose screws. The radio repeated its earlier warning: avoid signals and stay inside for now. I took a moment to observe the room, making sure everyone was aware of the plan. We added the new rules to the whiteboard, next to the old ones. Keep sound low, keep light dull. The whiteboard was filling up with times and brief notes. We stayed in our assigned zones. I took a drink of water and passed the bottle to Ben. The radio sputtered to life, then died again in fragments. "North corridor," a voice crackled, followed by static. "Flashing beacons," another voice said, then a warning tone. "Do not signal from windows," a calm voice added before the radio cut out. Tariq wrote down the fragments on the board. Phones kept searching for a signal, fluctuating between 1 bar and nothing. Text messages wouldn't send. Asha tried to access a city alert but only got a partial header. Milo looked up from his phone screen. We stopped trying to get a signal and refocused on the plan. I reviewed the rules for everyone, including our guests. Keep sound low. Keep light dim. Keep lanes open. If it hums, turn it off. If it shines, cover it. Close softly and lock twice. Bench light only. If you leave your post, announce it first. Mrs. Cho checked Lena's bandage. Her skin felt warm but not hot. Her pupils were responsive. "Drink," she said, and Lena took a couple of sips. Derek nodded when I asked if he was okay. A white flash lit up the sky to the east, but it wasn't one of ours. Heads on the street turned, then drifted in that direction before stopping when the light disappeared. Tariq noted the time. "If it sweeps this way," Asha said, "we keep the door shut." "Agreed," I said. "We don't follow the crowd." The alley remained quiet. The front held. The tape on the roof hatch was still flat. The skylight cover diffused the light, preventing any shadows. The bench light cast a downward glow. The radio crackled again. "Shelter sectors are now active," a voice announced. "Report to the nearest marshalling point when instructed." There was no map and no time given. "No move," I said firmly. "We're staying put with what we can see." Tariq wrote that on the board to avoid any accidental arguments. We used the quiet time to check batteries and headlamps. Asha replaced a flashlight that was flickering. Milo tightened a clamp on the ladder. Tariq wiped down the tablet and plugged it into a power bank. Mrs. Cho adjusted the wedge to make sure the back door was open exactly 1 inch. Ben asked if there was anything he could do to help. "Count the water bottles," I said, gesturing towards the stack. "Write down the total and let me know if any of the bottles feel soft." He got right to it. Nora opened her eyes. "Is it nighttime yet?" she asked, her voice groggy. "Almost," I said, pointing to the clock. "You're safe here." She nodded slowly. A phone pinged with an alert. "Thermal routes now active." "Follow heat beacons to corridor 2, but the map wouldn't load." "Ignore it," I said. "It's just going to pull people towards light and noise." Asha flipped her phone face down on the counter. We talked through a worst-case scenario. If a beacon parked itself on our block, we'd cut all the lights, reinforce the front with the forklift, and get down low. No one opens the front door and no one goes near the windows. If a fire started at the mini-mart, we'd seal off the garden and wait. At 8:55, the radio finally gave a complete sentence. "If you are secure indoors, remain in place until morning." I pointed to the whiteboard and circled the word "stay" for emphasis. The roll gate hummed faintly, then rattled at knee level, like someone drumming their fingers on metal, and the sound faded out beneath the skylight. We needed a clear decision, so I called for a vote. I pointed to "stay" and "go" on the board. Asha considered the papered windows and the skylight cover, then said "stay." Milo said "stay unless the roof catches fire." Mrs. Cho added "stay and keep the air circulating." Tariq said "stay." The phone map is useless and the radio's just spitting out gibberish. The visitors didn't get a vote, but I asked them anyway. Ben said "stay." Nora agreed on "stay." I marked "stay" and drew a box around it for emphasis, then we wrote out what that meant. Doors closed, garden locked, bench light only, keep voices low, stick to the watch rotation, freeze if anything happens in the alley. Don't answer if anyone bangs on the front door. If a beacon sets up on our block, we kill the lights and stay put until it leaves. We reinforced our responsibilities. Asha was in charge of light and window coverings and checked the front windows every hour. Milo was responsible for heavy lifting and movement and kept the forklift key on him at all times. Mrs. Cho handled air quality and sanitation and kept an eye on the back door wedge. Tariq was in charge of timekeeping and observation and marked the minute with arrows so we could communicate silently. I was in charge of the doors and the whiteboard, and I wouldn't open anything unless everyone agreed it was absolutely necessary. We set the watch schedule. Watch 1 was Asha at the front left and Tariq at the desk. Watch 2 was Milo by the main aisle and me in receiving. Mrs. Cho floated near the back, checking on Lena and monitoring the air quality. Everyone got 15 minutes off each hour, and we took a water break on the hour. We did a quick risk assessment. The main fire hazards were the mini-mart and the propane cage. We wouldn't touch the cage under any circumstances. We'd check it through the wire mesh and make sure the lock was secure. The biggest crowd risks were beacons and loud noises, so we'd avoid signaling. The risk of silhouettes meant keeping the lamps pointed at the ceiling. The risk of unwanted sounds meant padding anything that rattled or tapped. And finally, we had to be vigilant about bites and fever. Everyone shared one concern and a solution. Asha was worried about the skylight, so she added a second layer of plastic. Milo was concerned about the garden door, so he secured it with a wheel chock and a strap. Mrs. Cho was worried about fumes, so she'd test the airflow at the back door every 10 minutes with a paper strip. Tariq was worried about the tablet's battery, so he dimmed the screen and set up a schedule to rotate power banks. Ben said he was worried about getting enough sleep. I told him rest was part of his job and pointed to the chair. He closed his eyes. Nora said her elbow was aching, but Mrs. Cho assured her that the bandage was secure and the wound looked fine. We made a short list of things we don't do. We don't chase after beacons. We don't argue near the doors. We don't use power tools at night. We don't open the front door out of politeness. And we don't let anyone handle more than one job at a time. I drew a line under the word stay and wrote, "Until morning, unless fire or flood." Asha repeated the unless to make sure no one forgot the exceptions. The block outside seemed to stir with activity, then settle back down again. The crosswalk signal continued to chirp at its regular pace. A light blinked briefly to the east, then stopped. Milo tapped the propane cage with his knuckle. The lock was cold, the chain was tight, and the air smelled clean. "Clear," he reported. Tariq wrote down the time. Mrs. Cho checked Lena's temperature. "She's warm, but not feverish." Asha retaped a corner of the plastic that was starting to peel away from the skylight. We planned out the next hour in detail. At 10 after, check the garden. At 20 after, check the roof hatch. At 1/2 water break. At 20 to the hour, check the paper on the front windows. At 10:02, listen for any sounds in the alley. If nothing changed, we'd repeat the cycle. I kept an eye on the paper covering the front windows. It remained flat and undisturbed. The radio gave out one last cryptic message. "Corridor 2 is active, stretching from the stadium to the convention center." Then it went silent. A white light flashed to the east, lasting for 5 seconds. Heads down the street turned in that direction. I circled stay on the whiteboard again, just to be sure. A foot scraped against the roll gate, dragging slowly from left to right. The bench light suddenly seemed too intense. I dimmed the bench light by one setting, giving my eyes a chance to adjust. The dragging sound on the roll gate stopped. There was no further activity. The paper covering the front windows remained undisturbed. I took a deep breath and reminded myself of the plan. Night shifts used to be about stocking shelves and sweeping the floors. Now it was about keeping everyone calm, keeping the doors secure and spotting trouble before it escalated. I checked each latch by hand, the metal cool and solid beneath my fingers. I noted the time and moved on. Asha took the front left position, adopting a low stance and scanning the street. "Corners are clear," she reported, looking for any reflections on the papered glass. Milo stood guard in the main aisle, the pallet jack behind him. "Forklift's off and I've got the key," he said. Mrs. Cho sat near receiving, watching the back door wedge. "Air's still clear," she added. testing it with a strip of paper. Tariq wrote down each check on the board so we wouldn't have to rely on memory. I patrolled the store, making small adjustments. A card edge was peeling up, so I pressed it back down. A corner of a rubber mat was curling, so I taped it flat. The clamp lamp needed tightening, so I adjusted it. Nothing heroic, just the kind of routine maintenance that kept things running smoothly through the night. Time for our water break. I handed out bottles, making sure the caps were on tight. Ben drank his share and thanked me. "You can grab a quick nap," I said, gesturing to the chair facing the wall. He nodded and set the timer on his watch. Nora sat up, saying her elbow ached, but her head felt clear. Mrs. Cho checked her bandage. "The skin looks good," she said. "Here, take a couple more sips." And Nora drank some more water. The radio gave us a clear message. "If you are secure indoors, remain in place until morning." We'd already committed to that, but it was still reassuring to hear it. Tariq circled the word "stay" on the board and wrote "morning" next to it. I wasn't counting on morning to magically solve everything, but it was a simple, achievable goal that the team could focus on. I thought about my father locking up his garage at night. He'd close the door, double-check the side lock, and announce what he'd done, not for show, but to make sure he hadn't missed anything. I did the same, not feeling self-conscious at all. "Front gate secure," I said, touching the metal. "Garden bar in place," I said, testing the pin. "Back door wedge at 1 inch," I said, and the paper strip confirmed that the air was still circulating properly. Asha marked the time and told me I had 15 minutes off. I sat down near the receiving area and watched the others without saying a word. It was comforting to see that everyone knew what they were supposed to be doing. It also helped to remember that not every sound was a threat, and silence didn't necessarily mean we were safe. We stuck to the list and let the routine guide us. Phones buzzed, then lost their signals again. I kept mine face down on the counter to resist the urge to check it. We couldn't control what was happening in the city, but we could control this room and the people inside it. And that was more than enough to worry about for one night. Milo asked what we'd do if the paper on the front windows tore. "We'll cover it with a tarp and tape up the edges," I said, pointing to the roll by the ladder rack. "You and I will handle it, and Asha can cover your position while we're working." He nodded, visibly relaxing at having a clear plan. Mrs. Cho adjusted the back door wedge and wrinkled her nose. There was a faint smell of something burning. "Not from here," she said, tilting her head towards Maple Street. I wrote it down along with the time. Tariq held up the tablet so I could check the alley and roof cameras. Everything was quiet. The hour before midnight grew tense. A white flash started in the east, lasting longer than before. More heads turned on the street, forming a slow-moving line that stretched past the mini-mart and towards the stadium. We didn't move. I dimmed the bench light a notch. Asha checked the papered windows. The edges were still flat. Milo stood ready with the pallet jack, watching the main aisle. Mrs. Cho kept the back door wedged open an inch and replaced the paper strip when it became limp. Tarek logged the time and monitored the alley and roof cameras on the split screen. The beacon swept across the sky again. 3 figures near our block drifted towards it, then stopped when the light faded. The roll gate took a light tap, then another, followed by a shove that made the bolts groan. We held our positions. No one answered the door. I pressed my palm against the cool metal of the gate. The radio crackled with a single message: "Remain indoors until morning." We circled it on the board. Ben woke up and drank some water. Nora stood, flexed her elbow gingerly, then sat back down. "You're still good to rest," Mrs. Cho said gently. The acrid smell of hot plastic wafted in, then faded. Not from our store. Tariq noted it and marked east on the board. Milo did his garden check, placing a hand on the propane lock. Cold metal. No hiss of leaking gas. He closed the garden door softly and resecured the bar. The situation outside shifted again. The beacon held for 5 seconds, then 10. An eternity. The sound of feet scraping on asphalt grew louder. Shapes gathered near the mini-mart, then scattered, then huddled together again. We waited for the lull. A shout echoed briefly, then faded. The crosswalk signal stopped chirping mid-cycle. A strange silence fell over the street. We remained still. I did my security check. Front gate secure, garden bar set, back door wedge at 1 inch. Skylight cover tight, roof hatch tape undisturbed. I took a drink of water and passed the bottle to Asha. She took a sip and nodded towards the clock. At 11:47, the pressure against the roll gate started as a slow grind and built into a steady push. The bolts holding the gate groaned. A shelf in the front window creaked ominously. Milo raised the pallet a few inches, then gently eased it against the inside of the roll gate. We counted to 30, holding our breath. The pressure eased. A hand slid along the bottom of the roll gate, stopping at the lock. There was no attempt to pull or pry it open, just a pause. I kept my hand pressed against the cold metal and looked at Tariq for information. He shook his head. Alley clear, roof clear. The beacon lifted and moved on, pointing away from our block. The figures outside followed it. The crowd thinned. A gentle breeze moved through the crack in the back door. We stayed put, letting the remaining minutes of the hour tick by. Quiet gradually returned. I climbed the ladder for the rooftop check and reached for the hatch. The tape was still in place, but then my flashlight caught something. A small curl at one edge that hadn't been there before. I climbed down from the roof and told the group what I'd found. The tape on the hatch had a slight curl, but it wasn't broken and the roof was clear. We'd stick to the plan until morning. The board said stay, and that was final. I'm Tomas Navarro. I manage the night shift at Westside Hardware. We're not heroes. We just keep the doors secure, the lanes clear, and make the right choices. The basics work. If you're reading this, take these steps wherever you are. Choose a room. Make some rules. Keep the noise down. Keep the lights dim. Keep the exits clear. Put your water in one place and write down how much you have. Tape up anything shiny. Pad anything that squeaks. Close doors quietly and lock them. Give everyone a job they can handle and make sure they know what it is. If you have power, use one bench light and point it down. If you have a skylight, cover it. If you have to open a door, open the one you can secure again. If you get a message telling you to follow a beacon, think for yourself first. You don't have to be fast, just clear. We'll stay here through the night and wait for daylight. If the city tells us to move, we'll listen, then check the street for ourselves. If a neighbor knocks with the right code, we'll meet them at the side door and run through the same checks. If the door shakes, we hold it shut. If we change the plan on the board, we change it once, and that's it. If this helped, share it and add a line below and say where you are listening from. You can subscribe if you want more of these. I will record what we do and what works, and I will keep it simple. We settled in for the hour before midnight. Asha watched the front. Milo kept the pallet jack ready. Mrs. Cho monitored the air. Tariq noted the time. And I did one last check of all the latches. The tape on the roof hatch remained undisturbed. The hatch itself was quiet, and then a new sound reached us. A knock from above, something we hadn't planned for.